My ex-wife manipulated our son to choose her during our divorce. When my son finally reconnected after 5 years, he looked at me and said, "I thought you hated me." Now he cut her off. I need to share something that happened this week because I still can't believe it's real. After 5 years of complete silence, my son contacted me. I'm shaking as I type this. I'm Stephen, 35M. When I was 18, I met Danielle, 40F, at a local coffee shop where I worked part-time while finishing high school. She was 23, confident, with a good job at her mother's construction company. I was flattered by her attention. She seemed so mature compared to girls my age. Looking back, I realize how young and naive I was. 3 months into our relationship, Danielle told me she was pregnant. My parents were furious, especially when they met Danielle and realized the age difference. They thought she was taking advantage of me, but I refused to listen. I was certain we were in love. When Jacob was born, I dropped my plans for college and moved into Danielle's apartment. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony. My parents attended but remained distant and uncomfortable throughout. Danielle's parents, Martin and Rachel, both 62, were welcoming despite their initial reservations about our age difference. The first few years were a blur of diaper changes, midnight feedings, and trying to keep our relationship intact. Danielle worked long hours at the construction site, often coming home after Jacob was already asleep. I stayed home with Jacob and picked up odd jobs when Danielle's mother could babysit. I noticed concerning patterns in Danielle's behavior early on. When we attended her company parties, her eyes lingered on the younger male interns. Once, I found messages on her phone to a 19-year-old receptionist that went beyond professional communication. When confronted, she dismissed my concerns as jealousy and insecurity. As Jacob grew older, the differences in our parenting styles became apparent. I established routines, insisted on regular bedtimes, and made sure homework was completed before play. Danielle, during her limited time with Jacob, became the fun parent who brought gifts, allowed unlimited video games, and took him for ice cream right before dinner. When Jacob was 11, I discovered Danielle was having an affair with Ethan, her new 18-year-old assistant. I found hotel receipts in her jacket pocket and confronted her at home while Jacob was at school. Danielle didn't deny it. Instead, she claimed I had become boring and too focused on parenting rather than being her husband. The divorce process lasted 8 months. Danielle hired an expensive lawyer and fought for full custody, claiming I was too strict and controlling. During the custody hearing, Jacob stated he preferred living with his mother. The judge asked him why, and he explained that Danielle let him have fun while I just made rules. Those words cut deeper than anything Danielle had ever done. Despite my lawyer's advice to fight for joint custody, I couldn't bear forcing Jacob to live with me when he clearly wanted to be with his mother. I told the judge I would respect my son's wishes but requested generous visitation rights, which were granted. The first year after the divorce, I called Jacob regularly and picked him up every other weekend as scheduled. Our time together felt strained. He barely spoke during our outings, constantly checked his phone, and asked to go home early. After each visit, I would sit in my car and stare at the steering wheel for several minutes before driving away. When Jacob turned 12, he stopped answering my calls. His responses to my texts became shorter until they stopped altogether. I drove to Danielle's house once to check on him, but Danielle informed me that Jacob didn't want to see me. 3 months later, when I tried again, a new family had moved in. Danielle and Jacob had relocated without telling me. Martin and Rachel remained my connection to Jacob. They disagreed with their daughter's behavior and kept in touch despite Danielle's disapproval. Every month, Martin would call with updates about Jacob's school progress, his growing interest in basketball, and later, his first girlfriend. They showed me school photos they received and described how tall he was getting. Several times, they tried convincing Jacob to call me, but he refused. 3 years ago, I met Wilma, 36F, at a community garden workshop. Unlike Danielle, Wilma was thoughtful and respectful of my boundaries. She never pressured me and understood the complicated situation with Jacob. When we started dating, she showed genuine interest in hearing stories about my son and never suggested I should move on or let go as previous dates had. 2.5 years ago, Wilma discovered she was pregnant. I proposed immediately, not out of obligation but because we had already discussed marriage before the pregnancy. We planned a small ceremony at Wilma's parents' backyard. I invited Martin and Rachel, who attended despite Danielle's anger when she found out. During the ceremony, as I recited my vows, I kept glancing at the empty chair I had reserved for Jacob, just in case. Martin noticed and squeezed my hand. Later, at the reception, Rachel found me alone on the patio and told me that someday Jacob would realize the truth about his mother and come back to me. I wanted to believe her, but after years of rejection, hope felt dangerous. 2 months after the wedding, Wilma gave birth to twin boys, Ethan and Owen. The delivery room was filled with joy and celebration, but part of me ached for Jacob. I wondered if he knew he had brothers now. Martin promised to tell him and show him pictures. I kept photos of Jacob throughout our house. The boys knew they had a big brother from my stories, though they were too young to understand why he wasn't around. Wilma encouraged me to talk about Jacob, recognizing that keeping his memory alive was important to me. Last Monday, while the boys were napping and Wilma was at work, my phone rang. It was Martin, calling earlier than our usual monthly check-in. My heart raced immediately. He never changed our schedule unless something significant happened. He started with casual conversation about the weather in his garden, but his voice sounded tense. Finally, he told me that Jacob was staying with them now. He and Danielle had a massive fight, and Jacob had stormed out of the house 3 days ago. Then he said the words I've been waiting 5 years to hear: Jacob wanted to see me. He missed me. I gripped the kitchen counter and asked for time to process this information. After hanging up, I sank to the floor. The boys woke up from their nap, and I mechanically went through the motions of changing diapers and preparing snacks while my mind raced. That evening, I told Wilma about the call. She held me as I worked through my fears. What if Jacob blamed me for not trying harder? What if he resented the existence of his brothers? What if this was just a temporary reaction to his fight with Danielle, and he'd disappear again once they reconciled? Wilma reminded me that Jacob was reaching out now, as a 17-year-old with more understanding than he had at 12. That night, I barely slept, rehearsing what I would say when I saw my son again. The next morning, I called Martin back and asked what had caused the fight between Jacob and Danielle. He hesitated, then said it wasn't his place to tell me. Jacob should explain himself if he wanted to. He also assured me that he and Rachel hadn't shared their opinions about Danielle with Jacob over the years, believing that would only complicate things. We arranged for me to visit their house the following day. As Wilma helped me get ready, she promised to take care of the boys and told me to take all the time I needed. The 20-minute drive to Martin and Rachel's house felt like hours. When I arrived, my hands trembled so badly I dropped my car keys twice before making it to the front door. Martin opened the door and hugged me tightly. Rachel stood behind him, giving me a supportive nod. They told me Jacob was waiting in the living room, then grabbed their jackets and stepped outside to give us privacy. I stood in the hallway for several moments, taking deep breaths. Then I walked into the living room and saw my son for the first time in 5 years. Jacob sat on the couch, staring at the floor. His childhood roundness had given way to sharp angles and height. His hair was longer than in the school photos Martin had shown me, and he was nervously running his hand through it, a gesture I recognized from when he was little. I said hello and asked how he was doing. Simple words that couldn't possibly convey everything I felt. Jacob kept his eyes on the floor and immediately began apologizing. He said he was sorry for everything, for choosing his mom, for ignoring my calls, for disappearing. He said he would understand if I hated him now. I crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped my arms around him. I told him I could never hate him, that he was my son, that I had missed him every single day. We both broke down. When we finally separated, I touched his hair the way I used to when tucking him in at night. He continued looking down until I told him there was nothing to be ashamed of. When he looked up, I noticed his eyes, still the same deep brown I remembered, but now carrying a weight they hadn't before. After we calmed down, Jacob explained what happened with Danielle. For years, his mother had told him I didn't really care about him, that I was glad to be free of the responsibility of raising him. When Jacob recently expressed interest in contacting me, Danielle became enraged, claiming I had abandoned them and moved on with my new perfect family. The argument escalated until Jacob packed a bag and called his grandfather to pick him up. At his grandparents' house, Martin finally told him I had never stopped asking about him, that I kept his photos everywhere, that I had saved every school picture they had given me. Jacob then asked about my life now. I told him about Wilma, describing her as kind and patient. Then I mentioned his brothers. Jacob asked to see pictures. As I scrolled through my phone showing him Ethan and Owen, he grew quiet again. Then he asked if he could meet them someday. The question nearly broke me all over again. I told him they already knew about their big brother from my stories. We spent hours catching up. Jacob told me about his school, his interest in coding, and his friends. I told him about the house Wilma and I had bought, my part-time job at a bookstore, and the boys' latest milestones. As evening approached, Jacob asked if I could stay overnight. I called Wilma, who encouraged me to stay as long as Jacob wanted me there. Martin and Rachel returned with dinner, and we ate together as a family. Jacob asked me to stay in his room, the way he used to when he had nightmares as a child. As he fell asleep, I watched his face relax into the peaceful expression I remembered from his childhood. I left the next morning with plans to introduce Jacob to his brothers soon. On the drive home, I had to pull over twice when tears made it impossible to see the road. But for the first time in 5 years, they weren't tears of grief. Update 1: It's been 2 weeks since I reunited with Jacob, and I'm still adjusting to the reality that he's back in my life. Many of you asked for updates, so here's what's happened since that first meeting. The day after our reunion, Jacob texted me asking when he could meet Wilma and the boys. We arranged for him to come to our house that weekend. I spent the days leading up to it cleaning obsessively and preparing Jacob's favorite childhood foods, despite Wilma telling me I was overdoing it. Saturday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and checked Jacob's old bedroom, which we'd converted to a guest room after the boys were born. I realized with a pang that I didn't know my son's preferences anymore. Did he still like blue? Did he still read fantasy novels before bed? Wilma found me sitting on the guest bed, staring at walls that once held Jacob's superhero posters. Jacob arrived at 11 a.m., looking nervous but determined. Wilma greeted him with a handshake that turned into a brief, awkward hug. The boys hid behind my legs, studying the stranger who was supposedly their brother. I prepared lunch while Wilma and Jacob talked in the living room. Through the kitchen doorway, I watched my wife carefully navigating conversation with my son, avoiding potentially sensitive topics while finding common ground over basketball and technology. Owen was the first to warm up to Jacob, approaching him during lunch and insisting Jacob read to him. After lunch, Jacob asked if he could talk to me privately. We went to the backyard while Wilma distracted the boys with a puzzle. Jacob revealed more details about life with Danielle over the past 5 years. His mother had gradually become less present, leaving Jacob alone most weekends while she went out with boyfriends who were always uncomfortably close to Jacob's age. Danielle provided material things, the latest phones, expensive clothes, a car when he turned 16, but rarely spent quality time with him. The breaking point came when Jacob found old family court documents in Danielle's office drawer. The papers contradicted everything his mother had told him about the divorce and custody arrangement. Jacob confronted Danielle, who became defensive and eventually admitted to manipulating the situation to turn Jacob against me. Jacob started crying again while telling me this, revealing that he'd spent years believing I didn't want him. He apologized repeatedly for not reaching out sooner, for believing his mother's lies without question. I asked if he'd told his mother about our reconciliation. Jacob shook his head and explained that Danielle had called him several times since the fight, but Jacob wasn't ready to speak with her yet. Martin and Rachel were acting as intermediaries, ensuring Danielle knew Jacob was safe without revealing he was seeing me. Before heading home that evening, Jacob spent time playing with his brothers, who had completely warmed up to him by then. As he was leaving, Ethan asked when his big brother would come back. Jacob knelt to his level and promised to visit again soon, a moment that left me gripping the doorframe for support. Over the next week, Jacob visited 3 more times. On his 3rd visit, he brought his laptop and showed Wilma a coding project he was working on. Wilma, who works in IT, spent hours helping Jacob troubleshoot issues, their heads bent together over the screen as if they'd known each other for years. Not everything has been smooth. Last Thursday, Jacob arrived visibly upset. He'd finally spoken to Danielle, who reacted poorly to the news that Jacob was spending time with me. Danielle accused Jacob of betrayal and threatened to cut off financial support, including the college fund she promised. Jacob also shared concerns about how his return might be disrupting our family routine. He noticed how the boys demanded my attention when he was speaking to me and worried he was taking time away from them. I assured him there was room for everyone, but his question revealed how deeply Danielle's narrative had affected his sense of belonging. Yesterday, Jacob asked if he could occasionally stay overnight at our house. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't dared hope for that level of reconnection so soon. Wilma immediately said we could prepare the guest room properly for him, making it his space again. Last night, after Jacob left, Wilma found me organizing the linen closet for fresh bedding for Jacob's room. She sat down on the hallway floor beside me and admitted something she'd been hesitant to share. She was worried about how Jacob's return might affect our marriage and family dynamics. She supported our reconciliation completely but acknowledged the adjustment period would require patience from everyone. Her honesty prompted my own. I confess my fear that Jacob might disappear again if Danielle managed to manipulate him once more, or if Jacob felt too uncomfortable navigating his place in our current family setup. Throughout all this, Martin and Rachel have continued to be supportive, though they're caught in a difficult position between their grandson, their daughter, and me. Rachel called yesterday to warn me that Danielle was making noise about revisiting custody arrangements, despite Jacob being only months away from his 18th birthday. Given Danielle's financial resources, I'm concerned about what this might mean. For now, I'm taking things day by day. Jacob is coming for dinner tomorrow, and Wilma suggested we take a family photo, all 5 of us. The simple suggestion made me realize how much I've missed documenting Jacob's life and how many milestones have gone uncaptured. I'm trying to remain cautiously optimistic while preparing for potential complications. Danielle won't relinquish control easily, and Jacob is still processing years of manipulation. But for the first time in 5 years, I'm allowing myself to imagine a future where my family feels complete. Update 2: It's been 3 months since Jacob came back into my life, and the situation has evolved in ways I didn't anticipate. Many of you have sent messages asking for updates, so here's where things stand now. Jacob officially moved in with us 6 weeks ago. The decision came after Danielle escalated her manipulative behavior, including showing up unannounced at Martin and Rachel's house demanding to see Jacob, calling repeatedly at all hours, and eventually threatening to cut off Jacob's access to his college fund completely unless he moved back home. The final straw came when Danielle confronted Jacob outside his school, creating a scene that left Jacob embarrassed and angry. That evening, Jacob called and asked if our offer to stay with us was still open. Wilma and I immediately cleared out the guest room and helped Jacob move his belongings from his grandparents' house the next day. Living together has required adjustments on all sides. Jacob was used to having minimal supervision and few household responsibilities at Danielle's house. Our home runs on routines necessary for managing active 2-year-old twins. The first week, Jacob struggled with our dinner schedule, the noise level during the boys' playtime, and our expectation that he help with chores. Wilma has been particularly good at mediating these transitions. She established a system where Jacob has dedicated quiet time in his room when he needs to study, and we worked out a chore rotation that feels fair to everyone. Most importantly, Wilma never positions herself as a replacement mother figure but rather as an adult ally navigating family life alongside Jacob. The boys have fully embraced their big brother. They follow him around the house, demand his attention during playtime, and throw tantrums when he leaves for school. Last week, Jacob voluntarily rearranged his study schedule to spend an hour building block towers with them before dinner, an adjustment to our routine that happened without prompting. 2 weeks after Jacob moved in, Danielle's lawyer contacted us. Danielle was seeking to enforce the original custody agreement until Jacob turns 18, despite Jacob's clear preference to live with us. Our lawyer advised that given Jacob's age and the circumstances, any judge would likely respect his wishes, but the threat of legal action loomed over us. Martin and Rachel found themselves caught in an impossible position. They supported Jacob's decision to live with us but faced Danielle's anger for what she perceived as their betrayal. Rachel suffered a mild heart attack amid the stress, which temporarily shifted everyone's focus from the conflict to her recovery. While visiting his grandmother in the hospital, Jacob encountered Danielle in the hallway. According to Martin, who witnessed the exchange, Danielle attempted to guilt Jacob about abandoning her and breaking up the family. Jacob responded with remarkable composure, pointing out that Danielle had manipulated him for years and destroyed their relationship herself. The confrontation seemed to mark a turning point for Jacob. After returning from the hospital, he asked me questions about the early years of my relationship with Danielle, questions he'd been hesitant to broach before. I shared age-appropriate details about the power imbalance in our relationship and how Danielle's controlling behavior emerged gradually. Jacob then revealed something that explained much of Danielle's recent desperation. Jacob had discovered financial documents suggesting Danielle had been misusing the college fund she'd promised. The money had apparently been invested in a failing business venture with a recent boyfriend, and Danielle's aggressive attempts to regain control over Jacob likely stemmed from fear that this misappropriation would be discovered. This revelation prompted us to contact our lawyer again. With Jacob's permission, we initiated an investigation into the college fund situation. The preliminary findings confirmed Jacob's suspicions. The account that should have contained years of savings held less than a tenth of the expected amount. Last week, Danielle appeared at our doorstep unannounced. Wilma was at work, and I was alone with Jacob and the boys. I asked Jacob to take his brothers to their room while I spoke with Danielle on the porch. Danielle launched into accusations about me poisoning Jacob against her and threatened legal action not just regarding custody but also alleging parental alienation, ironic given her own actions over the years. When I calmly mentioned the college fund investigation, her demeanor changed dramatically. She left abruptly, and we haven't heard from her directly since. Martin called yesterday to inform us that Danielle has apparently left town. Her house is up for sale, and she told her parents she's relocating for a business opportunity. Rachel, still recovering from her heart attack, seems relieved by the distance this creates, though Martin continues to struggle with his daughter's behavior. For now, we're focusing on establishing stability. Jacob has started therapy to process the years of manipulation. His initial reluctance gave way to appreciation for having a neutral space to work through his complicated feelings about both his parents. The college fund situation remains unresolved, but Wilma and I have begun setting aside money each month to help Jacob with future education expenses. It's not the full amount Danielle had promised, but Jacob seems more relieved by our transparency than concerned about the financial shortfall. Tomorrow is Jacob's 18th birthday. We're planning a small celebration with Martin and Rachel, Wilma's parents, and a few of Jacob's friends. The boys helped me decorate the house with streamers and hand-painted signs. Jacob pretends to be embarrassed by the fuss but caught him smiling at the birthday banner Ethan painted with more enthusiasm than skill. There are still difficult conversations ahead and legal matters to resolve, but for the first time, it feels like we're moving forward as a complete family rather than navigating around the painful absence at our center. Update 3. It's been a full year since Jacob came back into my life, and this will be my final update as we've reached a place of relative stability that hardly warrants dramatic posts anymore. Jacob turned 19 last month and completed his first year of community college with excellent grades. The college fund situation with Danielle was eventually settled through legal channels. We recovered only about 30% of what should have been there, but Jacob has made peace with this outcome. Wilma and I continue contributing to a new education fund, and Jacob works part-time at a local tech startup that's providing valuable experience related to his computer science major. Danielle remained absent for nearly 8 months after leaving town. She surfaced briefly in February when her latest business venture collapsed. Attempting to reconcile with Jacob through elaborate gifts and promises of a fresh start, Jacob maintained firm boundaries, agreeing only to occasional phone calls that he controls the timing and duration of. These conversations remain awkward but have evolved from confrontational to distantly cordial. The most significant development came 6 months ago when Jacob asked Wilma about the process of legally changing his last name. Jacob wanted to take Wilma's surname, explaining that she had shown him more genuine parenting in 1 year than Danielle had in his entire life. Wilma was visibly moved but suggested Jacob take time to consider such a significant decision. After 3 months of consideration, Jacob proceeded with the name change. Danielle's reaction was predictably volatile, a barrage of angry texts followed by weeks of silence. Martin and Rachel supported Jacob's decision despite their complicated feelings about it. The paperwork was finalized last month, making the change official just before Jacob's birthday. The boys, now 3 and a half, have no memory of life without their brother. They've developed individual relationships with him, Ethan constantly demanding he read to him, while Owen prefers when he takes him outside to look for insects and rocks. Jacob handles their different personalities with surprising patience, though he still occasionally retreats to his room when the noise level exceeds his tolerance. Martin and Rachel visit regularly, having relocated to a smaller house closer to us after Rachel's doctor recommended reducing stress following a second heart episode. They've embraced their role as grandparents to all three children and provide Jacob with continuity to his past while supporting his current choices. As for me, watching Jacob and Wilma develop their relationship has been healing in ways I never anticipated. Wilma teaches Jacob practical skills like car maintenance and home repairs, ordinary moments that I observe from doorways, struck by their normalcy after years of extraordinary pain. Last week, Jacob's school counselor called regarding his application to transfer to a 4-year university next fall. She needed to verify family financial information and referred to Wilma as Jacob's mother throughout the conversation. Neither Jacob nor Wilma corrected her. After the call, Jacob mentioned it casually. That was easier than explaining everything, but the significance wasn't lost on any of us. We recently took our first family vacation, a week at a lakeside cabin. One evening, while the boys were asleep and Wilma was fishing off the dock, Jacob and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. Without prompting, he said, "I think I'm where I'm supposed to be." The statement was simple but encompassed a journey neither of us could have imagined when he walked out of my life 6 years earlier. There are still occasional rough spots. Jacob sometimes withdraws when memories surface, and the boys don't always understand when he needs space. The legal aftermath of Danielle's financial mismanagement continues to require paperwork and phone calls. Martin still hopes for eventual reconciliation between his daughter and grandson, creating tension during some family gatherings. But these challenges occur within the context of a stable family unit rather than across the divide of estrangement. Jacob leaves his bedroom door open most evenings, a small gesture that speaks volumes about his comfort level in our home. The photo albums now include recent pictures alongside the childhood images I preserved during his absence. Last night, while helping Jacob prepare for an upcoming job interview, I found myself thinking about the frightened man who posted here a year ago, desperate for advice about reuniting with his estranged son. The path forward wasn't clear then, complicated by years of separation and deliberate manipulation. If there's any wisdom I can offer from this experience, it's that healing family relationships isn't a single dramatic moment but rather thousands of ordinary ones, helping with homework, arguing about curfews, negotiating bathroom schedules, celebrating small achievements. The work happens in mundane daily interactions more than grand gestures. Jacob will likely move into university housing next fall, beginning the natural progression toward independence. But now, when he leaves, it will be a normal transition rather than an amputation. For that ordinary milestone alone, I am grateful beyond words.